Hello there, my name is Brigitte Kaiser and I am the founder of the Earth Custodians movement. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing to our channel.
This is Aldous Huxley, a man haunted by a vision of hell on earth. Mr. Huxley wrote Brave New World, a novel that predicted that someday the entire world would live under a frightful dictatorship. Today, Mr. Huxley says that his fictional world of horror is probably just around the corner for all of us.
It's a question of education, to teach people to be on their guard against the sort of verbal booby traps into which they're always being led, to analyze the kind of things that are said to them. I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values, that every human being is unique. And it is, of course, on this genetical basis that the whole idea of the value of freedom is based.
Well, of course, now a question comes to mind. Was capitalism one of those booby traps mentioned by Huxley? Well, according to this independent article, it definitely seems like it. This is how UN scientists are preparing for the end of capitalism. As the era of cheap energy comes to an end, capitalist thinking is struggling to solve the huge problems facing humanity. Well, according to this new UN report, capitalism as we know is over. And the main reason is simple. Due to our increasingly unsustainable exploitation of the planet's environmental resources, we are causing climate change, experiencing rising inequality, unemployment, slow economic growth, rising debt levels, and more importantly, impotent government. That policymakers were completely unable to connect the dots and see that all these crises are related. Obviously, capitalism was a giant illusion, and even more preoccupying is that despite the countless reports on the unprecedented environmental destruction for more than two decades, Wall Street was looking the other way. This is precisely why we need a money-free social structure.
There are a number of impersonal forces which are pushing in the direction of less and less freedom. The first of them can be called overpopulation.
Of course, Huxley knew that a system that operates for profit creates a lot of waste and scarcity. He's not going to tell us the absolute truth here. While close to 50% of world food is wasted in fields, storage, transport, in the preparation and selling of it, on our plates and in our fridges. So there was this report released by the Institute of Mechanical Engineers telling us that between 30 and 50% of all food that is produced on the planet is lost and wasted without even reaching human stomachs. Last August in 2018, the Reuters Foundation wrote a piece saying that the food waste could rise by almost a third by 2030, and this means that more than 2 billion tons worth of food will be thrown out. And of course they call that a staggering crisis. Let's not kid ourselves. The world is just mismanaged because profit know no bounds.
Are there specific devices or methods of communication which diminish our freedoms?
Well, there are certainly devices which can be used in this way. It doesn't be caught by surprise by our own advancing technology. This has happened again and again in history. And suddenly people have found themselves in a situation which they didn't foresee and doing all sorts of things they didn't really want to do. At present, the television, I think, is being used quite harmlessly. But I mean, imagine, which must be the situation in all communist countries, where the television, where it exists, is always saying the same thing the whole time, is always driving along. It's drumming in of a single idea all the time. It's obviously an immensely powerful influence.
To push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
It's extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is 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 extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Well, what is going to happen in the future is the dictators will find, as the old saying goes, that you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. That if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, partly by these new techniques of propaganda.
The new paper provides a bruising indictment of contemporary capitalism, complicity in the ecological crisis. The verdict is that capitalism and mainstream economics simply cannot deal with these problems, namely the systematic depletion of planetary ecosystems and environmental resources. This conclusion, however, is not only the indictment of the capitalist model, but also the indictment of all the politicians and economists who have supported it.
Writing about American political campaigns, you say all that is needed is money and a candidate who can be coached to look sincere.
Well, this is this idea that the candidates had to be merchandised as though they were soap or toothpaste, and that you had to depend entirely on the personality. I mean, the personality is important, but there are certainly people with an extremely amiable personality, particularly on TV, who might not necessarily be very good in positions of political trust.
So the Independent article goes on saying that at the same time our hunger for energy is driving what the paper refers to as sink cost. The greater our energy and material use, the more waste we generate, and so the greater the environmental cost. One does not need to be a PhD to say that. The wealth of the top 1% is no mystery. There you have it. The only solution that will do is to start producing and consuming consciously. But this would mean that most industries would have to go belly up. So let's run the money printing press instead. Indeed, the European Union is ready to spend hundreds of billions of euros to combat climate change during this next decade. And further, the Independent article reads, "We live in an era of turmoil and profound change. The era of cheap energy is coming to an end." Well, in our view, this merely foreshadows universal basic income and rationing. Our situation is appalling and dire. No matter how we look at the picture, we also must start thinking differently about reality. We cannot keep dismissing the metaphysical component of reality, which is exactly why the rulers of Earth populations have had the advantage for so many centuries. It is now time for a paradigm shift.